This is Pyongyang today, a city of over 3 million people on the banks of the river Taedong, the center of the Korean Revolution and the capital of the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. You might think you already know about the Korean capital, a model city and centerpiece of the Republic which came to prominence as a city in the mid-20th century. In reality, the history of this city stretches back much, much further. Pyongyang was once a fortified military stronghold, served as the capital of the ancient kingdom of Koguryå, and today's historical landmarks once served as key entry points in and out of this ancient settlement. So let's look back over 5,000 years of the Korean history to uncover the origins of Pyongyang. This is the Pyongyang you'll know today, home to 3 million people and a centre for culture, revolution and government. But that's in the 21st century. Looking back 5,000 years, here it is. The ancestor of the modern city, a small fortified settlement near the banks of the river Taedong named Wangomsong, which literally means Wangom Fortress, indicating that it was some kind of walled or fortified city. A small settlement by modern standards, it would soon become legendary as the capital of the first Korean kingdom, Kojosån. Koreans believe that this first great kingdom of Korea was founded by King Tangun in the 24th century BCE. Born on the sacred Mount Paektu, he came to found the city of Asadal on the flat, fertile land of Western Korea and declare it the capital of a new kingdom which would last over 2,000 years. Although little is known about life in ancient Kojosån, these peoples practiced agriculture, performed burial rites, and constructed walled towns across their kingdom. Little wonder then that this kingdom has come to serve as the birth of the modern Korean nation. By the 2nd century BCE, Kojosån had become a fiercely independent kingdom. To the south, bordered by the Jin states, a confederation of ethnically Korean realms influenced heavily by the culture and politics of Kojosån, these disparate tribal states contributed alongside it to the founding of the Korean civilization. And to the north, the Okcho state of the northeast, a tributary kingdom linked to Kojosån by culture and by blood. These Korean states existed in relative harmony, unified in their mutual distrust of their western neighbour, the Han dynasty. Despite emerging at different times, these three kingdoms coexisted on the peninsula and traded with each other for at least 200 years. With the Kojosån Korean capital, Wangomsong, serving as the beating heart of this Korean civilization, as both a political and cultural centre. In 108 BCE, the long-feared invasion occurred, as warriors of the Chinese Han launched an invasion of Kojosån. The Han Emperor Wu took Wangomsong by force, an ill-fated attempt to destroy the fledgling Korean state. Despite fierce resistance, Wangomsong fell into the hands of these foreign aggressors. These Chinese invaders would attempt to assert control over the Korean territories, despite resistance from the citizenry of Wangom and the rural peoples of the toppled kingdom. In 37 BCE, as the Korean opposition to Han rule continued, tribal and state groups resistant to subjugation by the Chinese began to spring up, eventually forming a new kingdom named Koguryå. Expanding rapidly in opposition to the Chinese forces, this ancient kingdom would spend years expanding across the Korean peninsula. Throughout its history, this new kingdom would have 3 capitals, each time moving its centre closer back towards Wangomsong, the spiritual home of the independent Korean civilization. Military engagements continued between the occupation and the new kingdom until, under the rule of King Micheon, the final Han outposts were cleared from the country, marking the return of complete Korean sovereignty. Following the liberation, 4 kings ruled over the ever-expanding kingdom of Koguryå, until in 427 CE, under the rule of Jiangsu of Koguryŏ, the capital was returned back to the site of Wangon. Texts from the time show that the city had by that point taken a name derived from the Chinese characters for flat land, which in Korean was Pyongyang, thus heralding a golden age for the city. A 23-kilometer outer wall was constructed, protecting the people from outside invaders. A fortress was built at the foot of Mount Taesong, and the Anak Palace became the heart of culture across the flourishing empire. New military units were established, notably the Palace Guards, specifically created to defend the royal family, who had become symbolic of this new Korean sovereignty, and continued defensive improvements meant Pyongyang would become one of the most fortified cities in the Far East. The city also became a centre of a new government bureaucracy. Under the royal court, the kingdom was divided into regional provinces, managed by local officials appointed by Pyongyang. These offices were responsible for managing the affairs of the state and implementing the policies of the royal court across the country. With the legacy of resisting foreign aggression, Pyongyang became the centre of the Koguryō military hierarchy. The king, supported by the royal guard, commanded the army, appointing military governors to each province who, in turn, employed infantry, cavalry, archers, and other military units to form a professional army. This system made up the backbone of the kingdom's military, with local militia forces and private worker peasant armies formed to ensure the kingdom could field a large defensive force in times of war. A powerful and independent kingdom, this army served to guarantee the Korean civilization would never again fall to foreign invaders. By the middle of the 7th century, tensions had risen between the three Korean kingdoms of Koguryō, Baekje, and Shilla. In 660, General Kim Yu-shin of the Shilla kingdom had led the final advance to topple the kingdom of Baekje, and so turned his sights on Koguryō. In somewhat of a betrayal of Korean unity, the kingdom of Shilla allied itself with foreign forces in the form of the Tang dynasty under Emperor Gaozong. This alliance led to Pyongyang coming under siege in 668 from the Shilla Tang forces. After over 2 centuries as the nominal capital of the kingdom, and centuries more as the spiritual centre of the Korean nation, the city fell to the Shilla Tang alliance. Pyongyang found itself a formal capital no longer, and now near the border between the Chinese Tang and southern Korean Shilla states. However, the people of the former Koguryō kingdom maintained their collective consciousness and considered their former kingdom the true nation-state of Korea. In 671, the Tang withdrew from northern Korea, allowing the Shilla to consolidate their control over the peninsula, including the culturally significant hub of Pyongyang. Now under the control of Shilla, Pyongyang found itself caught between the rise of a new power in the south and the looming forces of the Tang Empire to the west. But the story of Pyongyang doesn't end with Goguryő's defeat. Shilla's unification of the peninsula didn't last long. Internal fractures began to weaken its grip. From the 9th century, factions within Shilla began to divide the kingdom. The powerful gentry class vied for control, leading to a period of instability. While the kingdom crumbled, in the north, a new force was gathering strength, led by a noble from the old kingdom of Koguryō, named Wangon. Wangon, who would later found the Koryō dynasty, capitalized on Shilla's weaknesses. After years of warfare and military conquests, Wangon established Koryō in 918, positioning himself as the successor to Koguryō, and the Koryō dynasty as the rightful heir to the unified Korean peninsula. Under Koryō, the Korean capital was moved to Kojosån, today one of the only preserved ancient cities in Korea. With Koryō's taking of Pyongyang in 936, it became the legitimate kingdom of the Korean civilization, integrating the northern territories of Korea into the border of its ever-expanding state. Pyongyang took the name Seogyeong, meaning Western Capital, becoming, in effect, a secondary capital of the kingdom, serving not only as a military stronghold in the north, but as a symbolic heart of the Korean civilization as a whole. The city was not only a major cultural and economic centre, but a beacon of national continuity, linking the Korean people to the founding of the civilization by Tangun centuries prior. But Pyongyang was not merely about preserving the past. The western capital was a fortress, positioned strategically to defend Koryŏ against threats from the north, the Liao dynasty, the Mongols. Its military might is matched only by its spiritual influence. As Korean Buddhism began to flourish, the construction of grand temples helped connect the city to a cultural and religious legacy that stretched across Asia. In the late 14th century, Koryŏ found itself in a time of great national turmoil. The royal court at Chosŏn was weakened by corruption, and factional struggles divided the aristocracy. In the far north, the government had ordered an advance over the Amnok River against the Ming dynasty, aimed at restoring the grand empire of Koguryŏ in the name of the new Koryō kingdom. Under the command of an opportunistic general, Yi Song-gye, the armies instead headed south, marching on Kojosån, deposing the monarchy, and fomenting treachery against the established court. The Sonjuk Bridge, nearby the royal court of Kojosån, witnessed the assassination of Chong Mong-ju, a Korean statesman and ally of the Old Guard, by forces loyal to Yi Song-gye. His death symbolically marked the end of the Koryō dynasty, and the beginning of the Chosŏn dynasty. Pyongyang, once the beating heart of a mighty nation, was cast into the shadows under the feudal rule of the Chosŏn dynasty. Abandoned to stagnation, the new seat of government in Hanyang did little to strengthen the city against foreign aggression. And so, between the 14th and 19th centuries, Pyongyang was subjected to attacks from Japanese imperialists, Chinese dynasties, and even the Americans. In 1866, the US merchant ship, the General Sherman, attempted to test the Chosŏn defences by sailing up the Taedong River, despite warnings from authorities that they were not permitted to sail into Pyongyang. The provocation continued as sailors seized hostages and looted local villages. The incident culminated in the Korean defenders setting boats alight and sending them to impact the General Sherman, setting it ablaze and resulting in the death or capture of all crew members. This event serves as a telling precursor to Pyongyang's modern moniker, the capital of the revolution, as the incident represented the first aggression in a century of struggle for independence against the United States and other foreign powers. In 1894, in the dying days of the Chosŏn dynasty, Pyongyang became a battlefield for foreign powers, fighting for control of the peninsula. The Battle of Pyongyang pitched 13,000 soldiers of the Qing dynasty against 17,000 soldiers from Imperial Japan, resulting in a Japanese victory and Tokyo tightening its grip on Korea. The battle exposed weaknesses of the feudal rulers of Korea, unable to defend their national sovereignty and relying too heavily on the help of foreign powers. 16 years after the war, Japan would fully engulf Korea, forcing it into subjugation as a foreign colony, and appointing a series of governors to oversee Korean affairs. From 1910 until 1945, Pyongyang was subjugated by the Japanese Empire. Efforts were made to assimilate the citizens of the city into the Japanese fold. Shinto was taught as a state religion. Koreans were forced to take Japanese names, and the city itself, because of its historical significance, was exploited economically. Pyongyang underwent significant industrial development, with factories and railways built to serve Japanese interests, often with Korean forced labour. It was even renamed by occupying forces, given the colonial moniker Heijo. Local citizens of Pyongyang faced harsh taxation, whilst their Japanese governors were left to benefit from the city's output. Although the period was a dark time for Pyongyang and for Korea, it's from this period that Pyongyang grew into the heart of the Korean Revolution that makes it famous in national ideology today. The city played a key role in supporting the anti-Japanese struggle during the 1930s and 1940s. Revolutionary cells operated throughout the city, distributing anti-Japanese literature, organising strikes, and mobilising different factions of society against the occupation. Young revolutionaries secretly organised underground schools to promote reading Korean literature, and locals often passed information from inside the city to members of the Korean People's Revolutionary Army to aid in their struggle against Tokyo. It was said that revolutionary slogans would appear on walls and trees overnight to inspire the people and provoke the Japanese. Despite the brutal oppression of the people and harsh penalties for anti-Japanese activities, the city never wavered from its commitment to fight off foreign aggression. Some of the earliest members of the anti-Japanese Down with Imperialism Union came from Pyongyang itself, or the surrounding Pyongan region. In 1945, with the impending collapse of the Japanese war machine and the inevitable end of Japanese occupation, the imperial government in Tokyo surrendered. Korea was liberated from subjugation, and Pyongyang played host to the victorious guerrilla leader, the General Kim Il-sung, who delivered his victory speech, "Every effort for the building of a new democratic Korea," at what is, today, the Kojosŏn Revolutionary Site, marked by the Grand Arch of Triumph. This would not end the struggle for independence, however, as US forces refused to accept the authority of the Korean People's Committees which had sprung up around the country, instead demanding the peninsula be divided along the 38th parallel and ensuring US military control over the southern region, a decision which would later spark the Korean War and see US air raids all but flatten Pyongyang, reducing this great city of history to rubble. Rising from the ruins of war, Pyongyang was rebuilt. The spirit of the Chollima movement, a Stakhanovite movement to redevelop the country in the aftermath of conflict, saw a new, modern city built on the ruins of old Pyongyang. Pyongyang would come to be defined by its monumental architecture, expansive public spaces, and grand squares. The 1970s saw the completion of the Pyongyang Metro, the 80s the ubiquitous Grand People's Study House, the 1990s brought the world's largest stadium to Pyongyang, and the 2000s saw said stadium host the Arirang Mass Games, a symbol of Korean independence and prosperity. And Pyongyang hasn't stopped. In recent years, the city has been graced with a boom in construction, with grand new boulevards built in a uniquely Korean style, changing the Pyongyang skyline once more and giving the Korean capital a sleek, modern look, as new buildings continue to spring up around the city. Walking through downtown Pyongyang today, you'll find a gate. The base is made of granite, with a traditional style Korean gable roof. This Taedongmun Gate was originally built in the 6th century. This gate stood as the eastern entrance to Pyongyang Castle under Koguryō. It was later rebuilt in 1635 under Chosån and used to house the Pyongyang Bell until the 1890s. It was later damaged by the occupying Japanese and then by US bombing during the Korean War. Repaired in the 1950s and later created a national treasure of the DPRK, Taedongmun symbolises better than anything else the history and struggle of Pyongyang, surmounting foreign aggression, occupation and subjugation, but still standing after all these centuries. The history of Pyongyang is completely entwined with the history of Korea and remains the beating heart of the Korean state today. And who knows what the future holds. If you enjoyed this video, take a look through the catalogue of videos on this channel to find out more about Korea. From the Pyongyang Metro to what it's like visiting Samjeon. The DPRK Explained project is working to educate and inspire understanding of Korean culture, history, and everyday life. If you'd like to support the channel, consider backing us on Patreon and subscribe to DPRK Explained to make sure you don't miss out on anything.